You're listening to Lyfe and Shyt. I'm Daneyel Walker.
And I'm Tommy Walker.
Join us as we talk about our journey overcoming fears, boundaries, marriage, family, lifestyle, business, and whatever other shit you can think of.
We're individuals that came together to create one unit with one mind and one goal.
Hey, baby.
We get naked in the studio.
You silly. I'm mad you said it out loud.
I had to take my jacket off. It's hot in here. Shit. Y'all don't know what's happening.
What's up, baby?
Another beautiful day in paradise.
Another beautiful day in paradise. I love when you say that. It's like, okay, you're right.
Appreciate that.
Paradise.
Appreciate that. Yeah. It's like I took a deep breath, took it all in. That shit is beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So this topic is what we talk about today is, I don't know. I'm all over the place with this one. So
I don't know why.
So I'm gonna freestyle it.
Okay.
I don't even think we came up with a question for it.
I mean, we came up with a couple of questions. To be honest, I just don't think we agreed.
So okay.
Do children's stories make you better or worse? That's what I got.
So let's ask the people. Do children's stories make you better or worse? How do y'all feel about children's stories? Because personally, I had to really think about this topic because, Daneyel comes up with a lot of good topics and she makes you think. And I'm like, damn, like, all right, like you, and not thinking in the sense of like, I don't know what to say. Like I have to think back to my childhood, think back to my kids' childhood.
Reminisce.
Yeah, because all my kids are older now.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. It's true.
And then my granddaughter, I don't even I don't read her children's stories. I read her how to win friends and influence people. Like we're reading books that I read. So children's stories to me now is like Ryan Holiday. I mean, it's a different world. So
yeah. They say don't read your child a book that you wouldn't read yourself.
1,000%. So I'm a more nonfiction story kind of guy. So do children's stories make you better? I mean, I think their intentions were to make a child better. But,
okay.
But if you go back to the origin of children's stories, like back in the 1700s, right? For if you ask the internet. So, and it's funny because certain things you ask the internet, it always goes to England.
What does it say? What does it say?
Colonialism.
Of course.
Right.
But of course.
Right. So it don't go to like the tribal children's stories.
That's true.
Back in Africa when they used to tell children's stories.
Oh, that's real. That's
Mexico.
real.
It's like wherever there were tribes. The internet never goes back to the tribal days.
Okay. You're right. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, it only goes to the colonial days, and that's what we always reference, and that's why we always say, oh yeah, it started in 1716 and 1600s, and like fuck that. It goes way deeper than that. I'm sure they was telling fucking tribal stories in the Aztecs and the Mayans and in Africa, and it's like
yeah.
But we don't have that data.
Yeah, I mean it's written on cave walls and things like that, and we'd have to research it and like yeah, you're right.
Real shit.
Yeah, but when you think about children's stories. Like, what kind of children's stories did you have as a kid growing up? Do you recall any, or? Yeah,
so definitely it was, I forget his name, first name, Shel Silverstein, right?
Oh, okay. You used to read those books when you were a kid?
Yeah. So I had, my mom's and my pops got, we had the whole collection of those books. And I remember those because they was black and white books. And then, of course, true San Diego faction, I had Dr. Seuss. We all had Dr. Seuss.
Dr. Seuss was definitely one of the best.
Not everybody's friend today, but
nowadays it's
but
true.
Well known.
Yeah, Bearstein Bears was another one
right.
that I used to always watch, or it became a cartoon, but it was a book. In those books, it always gave you a lesson. Dr. Seuss, I don't know if I really ever truly understood the lessons that was given. I remember green eggs and ham, and he wouldn't eat them here, he wouldn't eat them there, and all that stuff, right?
So I'm gonna be honest with you, but that's the only one I remember. And
I don't remember the. So there's the Grinch. The Grinch is a great one, right? So you can never say Dr. Seuss without knowing the Grinch Who Stole Christmas is a great story, great children's story that has been said and done redone over and over again. Horton is a huge cute, or what is it? Horton hears a who. I never knew what that was about. I haven't seen it, so I don't want to say anything. But I never read the book or seen the movie. And then Green Eggs and Ham, and then there was the one, the Cat in the Hat. I was like, there was the one where the cat came in, or when they were by themselves at home alone or whatever, right? Which to me, it was just a great story on why you don't leave your kids alone. Right?
A strange black cat might roll with a cool hat. But going back to Green Eggs and Ham and The Grinch, and I said, I was like, well, I don't remember what was the lesson there, but now I think I do remember a little bit. It was Sam I Am didn't like anything. He reminds me of my dad. He was like, I don't eat none of that shit. And then eventually when he ate it, he was like, oh.
At the end,
this is okay.
I remember Sam's face.
It was like, oh, this is okay. Yeah. And then even with the Grinch, it was like, don't be mean.
I remember that.
It was like, you be mean because you're irritable, whatever the case. And then eventually you opened your heart. I think I remember the heart part, and then he found love. Okay.
The Cat in the Hat, don't let people in your house now when your mom's away. The Cat in the Hat, okay, ruckus, right? And then the Shel Silverstein books were my all-time favorites, and I bought them for our kids as well. It's like A Light in the Attic, Falling Up. Those were like the best. The Missing Pieces. Funny story too is that A Light in the Attic was actually banned a couple of times. And I was like, wait, what? The whole, like, they banned that book. It was a book about children's stories, right? So like, why would you ban this book? But then when I looked at the different stories of the reason why they banned it, because there's one story about, it's called Kidnapped, right? And it has a kid like bound by rope, and but it's a kid's book, and then one on how not to dry the dishes, and one's like and parents thought like, okay, kids are not going to want to do dishes. And then there's one where little Abigail, she wants a pony, and she doesn't get the pony, so she dies at the end. And so they're just like, that's, you went too far. Like, she shouldn't have died.
Wow. So that's the thing about these children's stories, which, they either especially the older ones. Nowadays, it's much better. Actually, nowadays, I think they got so smart nowadays where they were like, we're not even gonna put people in the children's stories. We're gonna put animals, weird objects, aliens, so they're not offensive, right? So because theory, back to Dr. Seuss, children's stories were typically stereotypical, right? And it was either a gender bias or a racial bias, and they stayed in those worlds. And to your point, it was like, oh, well, if you talk about this, then this is what kids is going to think about. And especially if you, as a parent, you're just reading your kids this book, and you read this kid that book every single night, what do you think this kid is going to start thinking about? He's going to reference, or she's going to reference that book, and unintentionally, oh, that's just like such and such and such in the book that you read every single night. Yeah. And it goes back to like what we talked about, like homeschooling. Reading children's stories is a small portion of homeschooling. Yeah, it's true. It sparks their imagination, definitely. Some of the best books now are children books. Before I even get into any of that, one of the books that we do, or we have actually a little case of that we read to our grandchild, or I read to her anyways, and that I used to read when I was a kid, are the Little Miss books. And that's the Little Miss Bossy, the Little Miss, and that used to be a cartoon, if I recall, as a kid. Never heard of it. And it had the Little Miss everything, and she loves it, and she'll look on the back of the book and she's like, that one, and then I like read it to her and she cracks up. And there's like all kinds of little miss people that do bad things or good things. No, and real shit, I was going through that box and I was like, hold up, and you said you're supposed to read it in order. Oh yeah, I think so. How they are, and I'm pulling them up, and it was like Little Miss Mad, Little Miss Sarcastic, Little Miss. I'm like, hold up. I don't want to read none
Little
of
Miss
this shit.
Mischievous.
Yeah.
And that's the only ones that she was picking. I was like, okay, no, let's read Little Miss Good.
I'm like, look, where's Little Miss Entrepreneur at?
Yeah.
Where's Little
Hey, that's a good thing. Maybe we make another set of Little Misses, huh?
Yeah.
I wonder if that's, I got, hey, that's an idea.
just put it out there, see? So the cool thing about children's stories, and it is a great opportunity. If you're an artistic, human being, you got graphic design, you know how to draw. Children's stories is a great opportunity for you to get into, and especially if you're trying to change the game. According to the internet, 12% of children's stories have a black representation in it. 12%.
That's crazy. Yep.
So
that is crazy.
So again, nowadays when you look at, because we only know because of what our grandchild is watching on YouTube and the TV, it was like, what is this? Oh, it's a pig, or it's whatever this object is.
Right.
So they get away from it and think it's okay. So it's like, all right, we don't have enough black representation in children's stories. So in order to fix that, we're just gonna put a pig in it. It's like instead of fixing it, no, we're just not gonna be offensive.
Yeah.
And then
that's crazy.
When you go back to like now, are cartoons considered children's stories?
Not really. I guess a children's story has to actually be a book form first, right?
Okay.
And then actually put into a story, right? I would say.
Oh, so with a book form might turn into a cartoon?
Yeah.
Because I remember having, we used to have subscriptions to Scholastic Reading.
Oh, yeah.
You
definitely.
remember
that? Oh, yeah. We would get the little packet, the little thing that you take home and your mom could sign off all the things. Yeah. I never got any of those books. So that's why when my kids brought them home, it was like I was a kid and I'd sit with that thing for probably a whole week until it had to be turned in for my kids. And then I'd pick all the different books that I wanted. You remember? I was like, ooh. And then the things would come, like the stickers and all that. I'd be way more excited than them.
Way more excited.
Because this is things that I wanted as a kid that I never got. So yes, I remember Scholastics.
Makes sense to Mrs. Books because you're way more excited.
And I love to read. So that's just one of the things that to be able to share with them and open up their minds. And I love to share reading with everyone, right? Whether it's a children's story or it's a nonfiction or a fiction. And I love fiction, of course, right? Then there's like the top books, like Goodnight Moon. I didn't know it had been around for so long. And not only that, but it's a book that just talks about good nights. But it's like one of the best selling books for children ever.
Really?
Which, according to Amazon, a copy of this children's book is sold like every 30 seconds somewhere in the world, which is crazy.
Damn.
It's like...
That's impressive.
Yeah.
That is impressive. So I'm not into children's stories. We're talking about it right now. I would be interested to see or hear what people are reading to their children nowadays.
Yeah, this is it. It's a Goodnight Moon. Oh, I apologize.
No, I mean
the Hungry Caterpillar is the one that is sold every 30 seconds somewhere in the world. Goodnight Moon is the first, like that's the number one book. The Hungry Caterpillar, which is about a caterpillar's journey from caterpillar to butterfly. And then number 3 is Where the Wild Things Are, which is a good one too. And then number 4 is Cat in the Hat, which came out in 1957, by the way. And The Goodnight Moon came out in 1947. How come there is no children's stories or famous authors that write children's stories in this era? What is going on? What about the scary children's stories? What about those?
What are scary children's stories?
Well, would it be like the urban legends, or do you remember stories to read in the dark? None of those. So like stories to read in the dark. It was story.
Hold up. Now I just want you to remember.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about books. Mm-hmm. How did I get you? How did we come together?
Yes,
no, I want to hear you
by you not reading books, but telling me that you did, but don't.
Exactly.
So of course, as a child, you didn't read the books either. So there was this book called "Scary Stories to Tell After Dark" or "In the Dark." I want to say it's like either one of those, right? And in this book, it had all these different, I would say they're like urban legends now, right? So it was that the hook story where someone was driving and they heard something scratching on the side of the door the whole time, and they just like drove faster. And then when they got home, they seen a little hook, and it was a guy who had just gotten out of a insane asylum, and he had a hook for a hand, and it was stuck on that car.
And then like Candyman.
Oh, no, and because the Candyman, you got to say his name and all that stuff. And then there's also the story where the person that's in the back seat of the car, and then someone's honking, and then every time that person honks, the person ducks down, right? So someone thinks that the person honking at them is crazy, but in reality, that person's trying to save them from somebody that's in their back seat, which.
And these are actual stories,
yes,
or movies.
No.
They're
This is a children's story. It's called Scary
people,
Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Stories like this.
I don't know, but this is the scary children's stories, right? And fun side note is, and I love American Horror Story. American Horror Story takes stories like that and flips it, right? So in the last Horror Story, they actually flipped that story. So that's pretty cool.
All right, so a children's story for me. Growing up in Far Rockaway, we had Hickory Dickory Dock.
That's a nursery rhyme, babe.
Yeah, I know. But Hickory Dickory Dock was about as scary as it got. And then.
But what was so scary about Hickory Dickory Dock?
So it was Hickory Dickory Dock ran up to something clock, whatever, something.
Yeah, there's nothing scary about that.
So in Far Rockaway. We had this white van, right? It was children's story shit.
This is a children's story.
But this was made, now you talk about urban legends. This shit was made up in the hood.
Okay, this is a hood legend.
Yeah, so in the hood,
urban legend.
We made up our own stories. So Hickory Dickory
made up
Dock,
or was real?
That's the thing. In our heads, we believe. Now, this shit is crazy because when you think about it, and everybody, like 1,000%, if anybody from my old hometown, when we grew up together, and if you're listening to this, 1,000% we all believe this. Even my brother. So this white van with a window. I don't even think they make vans like this anymore. So like the A-Team vans, like back in the day, the old A-Team vans had a window on the back. So if you seen a white van with a window on the top back driving around, that was Hickory Dickory Dock. And he was snatching kids up.
Oh boy!
So
I bet you if we ask Mom Luke, she'll be like, "Yeah, that was a real motherfucker. He was snatching." They call him the Hickory Dickory Dock Killer.
and in Far Rockaway, you know, where we went to school at, there's a bay, right? So we're in between the bay and the beach. It's a peninsula. So the bay is nothing but weeds. Like today is nothing like that. Now it's like fucking mansions and shit
amazing,
like that. Yeah, gentrification.
Yeah, you always talk about it. And I'm like, this looks nothing like that.
Yeah, so it was a landfill in the bay, and people all the time, oh, you found dead bodies, you found all kinds of shit, and all they would say is, that was Hickory Dickory Dock. And it was across the street from our elementary school. So we now back in those days too, it wasn't like playgrounds like how we have today, right? Like all we had was concrete, fences. It was like jail, fences, concretes, and 4 basketball courts.
Damn.
And it was all the way across. And God damn, now that I'm thinking about it, PTSD is a motherfucker. Growing up in New York, we had a baseball field that was painted on a concrete. It was there was no grass at all. Zero grass. Whole baseball field painted on concrete. So you had the baseball field and then 3-4 basketball courts in the back. Weeds, bay. And if you seen this white van, like every day we would see a white van. It was probably a painter. It was probably the neighborhood painter, unfortunately. And when we seen that white van, every kid in the park would run. Every kid. Like, we would all fucking
They like, run. We out. Yeah. That is so funny.
Because you didn't want to get caught up.
There's so many layers to that story that you just put out there, by the way.
Urban legend.
Yeah. Well, and then it makes me think, and a shout out to everyone who advocates for trees and greenery in areas that they just don't have. You know, in San Diego, I know it's people advocate all the time. So that's one thing. It's like, damn, you didn't even have a damn baseball field? Like, sheesh, right? So, I mean, like, honestly, like, these people that are advocating for these things, it's for a reason. It's so that kids don't have that story.
1,000%.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, that's awesome.
We was playing baseball. I mean, we played baseball on concrete. We played football on concrete.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we played on the streets. We're in California. It's pretty green. So in New York, I could just imagine. What about the 13th floor? Is that like a children's story, or do you think that's a real story? Like, is there really not a 13th floor? And if you if you go somewhere and they don't have a 13th floor, do you feel like, oh shit, like they really believe there's no 13th floor? And most places don't have a 13th floor.
So I don't know if that's a children's story, because if a motherfucker build a building that don't have a 13th floor, either he heard it as a child, or legit they just don't do it as a 13th floor.
Check it out. Most elevators don't have a 13th floor.
So in San Diego,
not marked anyway, right? Because technically still 13th floor. If you just count, it's right there.
There's
right?
more, but they don't say 13. So like,
don't name it that.
And in San Diego, we have the University Tower, and in University Tower there is no 13th floor.
No.
So I don't know. It might be. And you know what's funny is, instead of calling the 13th floor, they have the lobby. Because it's lobby, then first floor. Oh,
okay. So that does suffice.
So you skip the
13th. Well, then, but no, because then there's legit. It's 12, 14. I mean, you skip a floor.
I don't know if that's a children's story or it's just some hocus pocus shit.
They say that that it came from a story from back in the day, a children's story.
Was it the 1700s colonial version?
Yeah, definitely, right? It's a lot of stories that actually came across that bad things that happen on 13th floors of lots of buildings, and that's why. So it wasn't just like one related one, but it was enough to spook a lot of people. So
you made fun of well, you ain't make fun of it, but you kind of dug the onion layers back on my story. Y'all didn't have no urban legend children's stories growing up as a kid? Well, in the valley, because you grew up in the valley. It was like Amanda and Stephanie had horses. There was no crazy.
Sarah and Amanda.
Oh, Sarah, not Stephanie. I'm sorry, Sarah and Amanda. They didn't have no crazy ass children's stories that y'all was scared of. Y'all were just comfortable in your skin all the time.
No. There was definitely some children's stories that we were scared of, but we read these books, so it was like that.
It wasn't nothing y'all heard in the streets.
It wasn't the realness, you know what I mean? I mean, like I said, in New York, it was probably real what you're talking about. You know what I mean? Like, legit, they found bodies in that area, I'm guessing, right? And legit, people were snatching people up. Like, I remember a story vaguely about, you know, those kind of vans and to stay away from them. But it wasn't like in my face. Perhaps it was in your face there because it was actually being done, you know? Right. But no stories for us. Oh, I'm lying. It's the hitchhiker. That's the main one I would always remember as a kid. And it wasn't just a story. I think it was a thing. Like, people actually got hurt too being a hitchhiker.
As a kid, if you was talking about hitchhikers as a kid, that sound like some valley shit. Like,
well,
hitchhikers?
People hitchhike. I mean, like, nowadays.
There's no hitchhikers in New York.
Very few and few. Never?
Never.
People didn't hitchhike back then?
You could walk everywhere or you hop on the train. Like you didn't even, literally, you just hopped the train.
Have you ever seen a hitchhiker?
The movie, yeah.
No. And a legit person with their thumb out? Okay.
Yeah. Mexico, here.
I would say
only
Mexico.
On this side.
Yeah.
Never on the East Coast. Especially never in New York. I didn't even think hitchhiking was real until I came out here. I was like, it was like watching something majestic.
It was a real story, right?
Like, oh, shit,
it was a real story.
There's a hitchhiker. Did you pull over? Hell no.
It's real.
No, hell no. I seen the movie. No, you don't do that.
You don't pull over a poor person who needs a desperate ride. Like,
put a sign up. I'll throw $1 out the car. Hopefully 20 people go by. You get $20.
You get halfway there.
Back in the days, Greyhound was $25. You go anywhere on Greyhound.
Yeah, Greyhound is still definitely an option. So you're right. Which is probably why there's not so many hitchhikers, okay? That as many as there used to be.
Hey. All I got to say, these children's stories are wild. I grew up on different children's stories, obviously. Daneyel actually read books. And if you know our story, that's the real thing.
So when we were talking about this originally too, you were talking about a childhood friend who used to come home, and that was my story too with my stepfather, my brothers and sisters' father. He'd come home and he would be get in lots of bar fights and things, and he'd be all bloodied, and he'd tell us different stories like of what happened, but it was never that he was in a fight. We didn't know that until we were older. So he'd be like, "Oh, it was crazy," like I don't know, it's weird. like we did Halloween early, or like he told us these weird stories. We just be like,
so you
what?
also had a butch?
yeah. Well, but it was Frank. So
oh, it was
Frank. Yeah.
Your father would come home bloody.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
he's
bruised up and face all crazy, but he'd fight. We didn't know, like I didn't understand, like why would he be fighting? Like why do you have black eyes? That's weird, right?
All right, I want to make sure the people understand because you're going very fast. So your stepfather Frank would come home, beat up,
bloody,
and would tell you a story and say, "Oh, Halloween came early."
Yep.
God damn, your children's stories was not in the hood. They was in home. Now, Amanda and Sarah wasn't around, right?
No, this is when we lived in we were in Thousand Island. No, Thousand Oaks. Yeah, I want to say we were in that area. Yeah.
That is hilarious. Yeah. So my dad had a homie that used to come over. His name was Butch, man. Rest in peace, Butch. So as a kid, whenever my pop's friends came over, we ain't really talked to a lot of. It was always like one or two friends and then all of my uncles. But Butch,
you had a lot of uncles,
and I do have a lot of uncles, shit ton of uncles, and I love them all.
I love them too.
But
Shout out to the uncles.
Butch would come and tell these stories. I mean, just captivating stories. Like it was a trip. Like I mean, like he would sit. It was me and my brother, and then shit. And even if we had friends around, he would sit down and. It was the only dude that would give us that much attention, especially as a grown ass man. Because my uncles would be like, "Get the fuck out of here! I'll punch you in your face." It was like, "All right, no problem." Yeah. But Butch would be like, "Oh, let me tell you this," and he would tell these stories, man, and we would just sit there like in awe of every.
I don't know if
every single story.
I don't know if I ever heard a Butch story.
Never. Honestly, it hurts me that I don't remember a story that he told. I mean, but that's how young we was. Like this was like late 80s.
But you remember him, and that matters, right?
Oh, no, 1,000%. Yeah, that 1,000%.
You go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I said even because the way he passed away, it was tough.
Yeah.
Like I remember, like it hurt just as much. It hurt my pops. Like the way it hurt my pops, it hurt me because it was like, man, like that was my pops' homie, all my uncles' homie, and this dude used to come to my house. Like he used to be there talking to me, telling me these stories. He actually gave us time. The best storyteller I've ever known, like human to human.
And another great storyteller that's in your family that you didn't say, but I love the way this guy tells stories, and I love the way you guys tell the stories that you told. And I'll give you a hint. Hey guy.
Uncle Ron.
Come on, guy. Let me tell you this, guy. Sit on here, guy.
So you know what? Now I'm glad we're freestyling this because you're opening it up.
I got notes.
Yeah,
I freestyle.
No, me, I'm freestyling. So
I'm just bringing it to your remembrance.
So legit, all of my uncles are great storytellers.
That is true. That is true. That is true because Uncle Bobby got some stories for your ass. That is true. And I don't know. And I guess we're going a little off of children's stories, but they're just stories that were told when we were children, right?
So to your reference, it's my children's stories.
Yeah. Ooh, we can make a book of those children's stories.
1,000%. So I didn't have books. I had my uncles, and I had my pop's friend Butch, like those, and then like I said,
okay, speak on that. Yeah, that's real.
So those are all the children's stories that I had because my uncles would tell. Even to this day, they tell stories like. From Uncle Timmy, Uncle Bill, like every single last one of my uncles on my father's side, my mother. I got one uncle on my mother's side. Even the stories that dude, Uncle Darryl, tell you, you'd be like, it make you like, really?
Yeah. and legit, I've heard stories, and I come back and tell you, and you're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, like that's how Ty got his name. Like, wait, what happened?
And it's always a reference. Like,
it's so good. Their stories are so good. Those are like the good family stories, though, too, right?
And these are the stories that I grew up on as a kid. So I respect. So going back to what I reference about, you know, where they say children's stories first represented in the colonial version, my stories are tribal. My story started in my tribe, my family. So I love all of you guys for taking that time to tell us those stories. And even to today, like, you know, I try and pass on my stories and things to my children. And, you know, we reference how children's stories they make you better and all that stuff. And now to answer your question, yes, they do.
Yeah,
they definitely make you better. And it's not the commercialized ones. It's the ones that come from your heart. It's the ones that we know as human beings, and whatever we can do intentionally to make these children better, then, you know, let's go out there and do it intentionally on purpose with respect for everything that's happening around us.
Yeah, I love that. Albert Einstein says, if you want a child to be intelligent, read them fairy tales, right? If you want them to be even more intelligent, read them even more fairy tales. And the premises of that to me is, if you want someone to have like imagination is something that you can't really teach, right? It's something that you just kind of pick up, right? You want someone to learn, you want someone to think, but you want them to think outside the box. And the way that they can think outside the box is to hear stories that are outside of the box, right? To allow their imagination to be pushed beyond limits. And then when it comes to business, when you're sitting in a business room or a boardroom, and you're sitting around the table, you're able to go to different levels.
That's fucking dope. Thank you so much for bringing this topic up and opening up my heart.
I love you.
I love you. This is Lyfe and Shyt. Do us a favor. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. Leave a review. Let us know what your thoughts are. That's the only way that this show is going to be successful. And we appreciate you. Talk with you next time.